Okay, I'm starting to put the fork back together, and the first thing I'm going to put in is the new rubber seals that replace the original felt seals. Now these have got a lip on one side, plain on the other, so I'm going to fit them in opposing pairs, with the one that fits here with the seal facing inwards to stop lubricant coming out, and the other that fits at the end with the seal facing outwards to stop dirt getting in. I just give them a coat of grease, as much as anything to protect the steel housing a little from rust, and just work these into the slot. It's not really something I can get a camera in particularly well, but it's a simple enough operation, just working around until it pops into place. Okay. Put some grease on the second seal. Okay, with the next piece in is the shoe, and the shoe goes at the front of the fork, which is this side. I'm judging by the attachment lugs. So the shoe goes at the front with the roller at the back, taking the loads under braking, and this has to be lined up, dropped in, and then turned over at 90 degrees, which can be a little bit of a trick. And I'll just drop its locating pin in temporarily to hold it in place. So on the other side we've got the roller with its thrust washer. I've just given these a slight coating of oil. And then we've got the top retaining plate. You can see this side's got a hole which corresponds with a pin on the underside of the head of this spindle. So we can drop that in place, and that in place, manipulate them into the holes, and I want to set this eccentric at its low point so the roller's as slack as possible. Now these countersunk screws have got quite a steep taper on the head, and they go in next. Now working from the top end, the next piece in is the bottom spring platform, followed by the spring, and then the top guide bush with its two fixing bolts and its third fixing bolt, which is also the lubrication port. And this fits with the cup side down to locate the top of the spring. It has to be lined up as it goes in so that the attachment holes line up. And it needs to be compressed in order to get the spring in place. So the way I did this was to use the rod, a spacer and a piece of plate and a clamp. So with these three in place, I've got a controlled means of compressing the spring and drawing the bush into place. And unfortunately, unlike last time, the bush has not slipped straight into position. So just with a screwdriver in one of the other holes, pull it round like so. And get one of the fixing bolts started. There's another on the back, spaced at 120-degree positions. And in fact I've got the bush completely misaligned because the hole for the lubrication port is much larger. So let's try that again. So this time the large hole I'm running to be in line with this hole in the front. And get the clamp to cooperate. It's more like it. The first started. Try getting the back one started instead. That's the one on the back started. Yeah, that feels fine. I thought I had it cross-threaded for a moment. It's a 17 for the lubrication fitting, 14 for the other two. I'll give these their final tightening once they're actually on the bike itself. Okay, we're finally at the point of fully assembling the forks, and one of the final things to do is to set the oil level. Now the manual isn't 100% clear, and it's in Italian, so I've had to be translating it gradually as I go. What the manual says is you insert the fork legs and you have the wheel in place and everything, and it indicates that you measure up the oil level up from the bottom of the lower tube, and that seems like a really awkward way of doing things. And, you know, just getting the oil, because the top of the tube is up here somewhere, so just getting the oil into the lower tube and not down in between it and the outer tube, you know, requires a piece of pipe. And in any case, I did some measurements and did a bit of playing around and got an oil volume of 85 millilitres, and I've filled the tube with it mounted in the vise, which is a much easier, much less messy way of doing it. So the next thing to do will be to insert this filled tube into the fork, and it's literally just a case of introducing it up between the slider and the roller, up through the spring, and then wiggling it around a little bit so it lines up with the inside of the top guide bush, and then pushing it home, and it'll stay there by friction before we screw in the damper tube, which holds everything together. I've just put a dummy wheel spindle in temporarily to stop the fork leg rotating, so that I can then use the tool I made to tighten down the damper tube. And this is really a two-hand job. I have to hold the control cables out the way to get the ratchet on there, but that's the basic idea, is stop it rotating and just tighten that down. They don't have to be particularly tight. The whole procedure will get repeated for the other side. Put the lower tube in the vise, pour in the 85 millilitres of oil, slide it up into the fork leg and screw in the damper tube, and then we're well on our way to getting the front end reassembled and brake hooked up, speedo cable hooked up, and then it can be dropped back down onto the bench. With the damper tube tightened down, I've then pulled the damper rod up to its full extent, and onto that goes a nut, being very careful not to drop it down the tube. And of course this has got a burr in it and doesn't want to go on. Let's sort out that and I'll be back. Okay, I just run a tap through the nut to clean any dirt out, and there was a slight burr on the thread as well, which I've sorted out. So I'll just run the nut down to the end of the thread. Hopefully there are no more burrs on there to impede progress. That seems to be down where it needs to be. And the next thing to go on is the top out spring. And that gets sandwiched against the fork cap. And then finally there'll be an acorn nut. So again, this is a little bit of a two-hand job, probably. Got to get this thread started square. Oh, actually, there we go. I'm just going to put the acorn nut on at this side to make sure that the damper rod doesn't end up disappearing through the top nut and we have to start all over again. There we go. So I'll get all that tightened down, repeat the procedure for the other side, and then the wheel and everything can go back together, and that'll be the fork sorted out.